I want to start this off by saying I'm not the one involved in these cases. All of these files I got from different people in the first responder field of work, and a few detectives that have since retired. After collecting these stories over the years, I just wanted to share them with you guys on the internet and see what you guys had to say about some of the stories. Not that I'm hoping that any self-proclaimed comment cop or Reddit detective can step in and solve the case, but I'm sure that won't stop a few of you from trying. Oh, and of course, a lot of the names and such have been changed to protect those involved. Case number 1. Randy Solomon, the Frozen Man. On April 18th, 2016, tenants of an apartment complex called in to report a foul scent coming from within the building, and that the floor around the door number 9 was soaking wet. No one had seen anyone enter or leave in some time, and heard nothing but the sound of television on the other side of the door. So the landlord comes and unlocks it, and sure enough, there's a body in there. Sitting on the couch upright was Mr. Randy Solomon, just as if he was still watching TV in his boxers. Weird thing is, the whole place is soaking wet, as if the pipes burst and flooded the whole thing. I mean, the carpet is ruined, the furniture has that awful smell of waterlogged fabric, and Solomon himself was soaked from head to toe. The other odd thing was that every electrical outlet and window was covered in insulation foam. TV was the only thing still plugged in, displaying the usual infomercial crap to the dead man. The next thing that was weird was that none of the water pipes had burst, nor none of the faucets were left running. It was like a flash flood. It just came right through the place in this tiny one-bedroom apartment and stopped just a few hours before the door was opened up for the first time in months. Randy Solomon was 44, lived alone, never married, had no children either. He worked odd jobs but was unemployed for 2 months before his death. His rent was always on time, and there was never any complaints about the man, but the landlord and his neighbors just suspected him to be a loner. The part that still gets me is that after the autopsy, his cause of death was hypothermia. The guy froze to death on his couch in his boxers in April, and like, what the fuck, right? Yeah, well, no sign of foul play and no real leads. The case went cold. Case number 2. Donnie Edmonds. Let Us Die. This one comes from an old friend of mine who used to be an EMT. Back when he had been working with the local scene for about a year and a half, he had several calls to this one home out in the middle of nowhere. A rundown old mobile home that housed a couple in their late 50s, both unemployed by now and living the great retirement lifestyle. That one being of Donnie day drinking and his wife Helen complaining that the world was falling down around her, as she popped way too many pills and, more often than not, had to be rushed off to get her stomach pumped, only to repeat it all again about a month later. So when he got the call for the familiar address, he had figured it was just a routine thing. Escort her to the hospital, listen to an old man gripe and reek of cheap beer the whole ride over. Well, they got to the property, but first thing they see is Helen sitting on the front steps and sobbing loudly, holding herself. It turns out that as they were sitting there in the living room, just chatting it up and having a normal conversation, Donnie Edmonds produced a pistol, and in one motion, he shot himself in the head. So they get to work prepping the body to be moved, and all the while talking to the wife. According to her, her husband had not seemed upset or sad or anything out of ordinary. And at the time of their conversation, they were, as far as she could tell, both in a decent mood. Well, as they got started on him, the old man, whose blood was splattered across the wall behind him, looked at the two guys, as in his eyes darted right to them. And then he stood up and shouted at both the paramedics, "Leave. Let us die. Just let us die." with an absolutely furious expression before he collapsed again. They rushed him to the hospital, and luckily enough for Mr. Edmonds, he lived. He claims he has no memory of that day, nor any thoughts of self-harm before that point. His blood alcohol level was 0. Over the next few years, my friend would tell me that they never had another call out to that house again. And the last he heard, Donnie Edmonds was a sober man. Case number 3. Beth Holtum. The Walking Dead. This is one that is similar to the last story, but the ending isn't as nice, so just prepare yourself for that one. Miss Beth lived alone on a small farm property that her late husband had left her after his passing away. She was the picture of the sweet old grandma you see in any family gathering that warms your heart and hits you right in the nuts with nostalgia. Every Sunday her grandkids would come together for lunch and they'd all enjoy a home-cooked meal made by Mrs. Beth. Well, one Sunday in December the family drives up and finds that things just aren't normal. First of all, the front yard is scuffed up like an army had marched up on the grass and fought hand to hand with their enemies, and then simply walked off. They went to the house to find that the door was unlocked, and inside, just over the threshold, was a trail of blood and dirty hand and footprints. Human prints, like someone was crawling around on all fours with dirt from outside coating their palms. Her daughter followed the trail to the back of the house, where the master bedroom was. Inside, her worst fear came true. On the bed was her mother's corpse, blood everywhere, as her mother had multitudes of sharp objects stabbed into her and still sticking out of her. Police investigation puts the death around 11:30 p.m. The cause of death? Multiple self-inflicted stab wounds across her body. From the recreation the investigators could put together, there was a large gathering on her front lawn. At the same time, she proceeded to lie in bed and stab herself with multiple knives, ice picks, and other sharp objects, just again and again into her own body. And then lay there for a moment before getting up, walking to the front door, and unlocking it and letting someone in to walk in on all fours. She would then return to her bed, lie back in the same spot, and bleed out. The prints were tracked all over the house as if the person was looking for something, but nothing of value was stolen and nothing was really out of place. The prints also had no known matches in the police database. The case was ruled a suicide but never officially closed. Well, that's all the stories I got for you for now. There's a few more. Quite a few. And some are a little more interesting than others. Some are... Well, to be honest, I wouldn't blame you if you thought I just made most of this shit up. Anyway. Take it easy out there.